So let's continue our work now with solving linear equations. And these are going to be equations that are going to take more than one step to isolate the variable. So here are some strategies. When you solve linear equations, you want to simplify first each side of the equation as much as possible. So if you have like terms on the same side of the equation, or if you have parentheses in which you can use distributive property, you want to do that first before you start using the properties of equality that we discussed in the previous videos. Then you're going to collect all of the variable terms to one side of the equation. That's going to be step number 2. You're going to use, usually you will be using an addition or subtraction property to get the x variables or all the variable terms on one side of the equation. You're also going to then collect all the constant terms. So all the terms, the numbers that do not have a variable, you're going to collect those to the other side of the equation by again using the addition or subtraction property. The fourth step is you're going to want to make your coefficient of the variable term to equal 1. So you want to have your equation say 1x instead of some other number in front of x. And we're going to be using multiplication or division property of equality to get that x coefficient to equal 1. At this point, you should have the solution to the equation so you can state it. And it's always a good idea to check your solution by substituting it back into the original equation to make sure that you haven't made any mistakes or that you actually do get a true statement when you substitute the solution back into the equation. So let's look at example number 1. We have 3x minus 11 equals 13. Notice each side of the equation is as simple as it can be so far. We don't have to combine like terms or just use distributive property for as indicated in the table for step number 1. Step number 2, which would tell us to get all the variable terms on one side of the equation, well, this equation only has 3x as the only variable term, so that's taken care of. But now look at this. Step number 3 says get all the constant terms on the other side of the equation. So we've got negative 11. So here's our equation. As constant terms, we have this negative 11 here and this 13. Okay, and we want those on the same side of the equation, and usually we want to move them over to the side of the equation that doesn't have the variable. So let's move the negative 11 over to the right hand side, and for that we're going to use our addition property because we've got subtract 11, right? So we're going to add an 11 to both sides of the equation. So that isolates the variable on the left with a 3x, and then over here on the right hand side we have 24. Okay, we're at step number 4, which says make the coefficient of the variable term equal to 1. So the coefficient of the variable term right now is a 3, and we need to equal that to a 1. So we're going to use division property. We are going to divide both sides of the equation by 3. That's the division property of equality. And so now we do get an x, a 1x or x on the left-hand side and 8 on the right-hand side. So the solution to the equation is 8, x equals to 8. To check the solution, we would substitute back into the original. So 3 times 8 minus 11, does that equal 13? 24 minus 11, yes, that equals 13. So our solution checks. And again, the solution is x equals to 8. Let's look at equation number 2. Again, we do not have any simplification to be performed on either side of the equation first, but we do check for that. What we're noticing again is that we have constants that are on two sides of the equation, right? So we will be moving that 3 over. This 3 has to come over with the negative 21. And since we have an addition here, we'll be subtracting 3 from both sides. So I'll write this horizontally this time. Subtract 3 here, and then negative 21 subtract 3 there. So on the left-hand side, we have 4x because 3 minus 3 is 0. And on the right-hand side, we have a negative 24. Now we look at the coefficient of x. It's a 4. We need to get that to be a 1. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. That's our division property, right? And so now here we get 1x or x equals negative 24 divided by 4, which is a negative 6. So negative 6 is our solution. And to check, we substitute negative 6 back into the original equation. So what do we get? We get here negative 24 plus 3, which does indeed equal negative 21. So it checks with our original equation. So negative 6 is the solution. In this next equation, we are going to once again solve for x. The only difference, do you notice the difference between this equation and the last one? If you say it's that 5/6, that fraction coefficient, you're absolutely right. But other than that, our steps are going to be the same, so that means we're going to start first by getting that those two constant terms together on the right-hand side, right? So we have this 5 and the negative 4, and we need them together on the right-hand side. So our first step will be to use subtraction property, and we will subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. So we get here 5/6x, because 5 minus 5 is 0, and we get a negative 9 here. Okay, we're looking at the coefficient of x. It's a fraction, it's 5/6. So how do we change that to a 1? And our last video, we talked about using the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 5/6. And what's the reciprocal of 5/6? That's 6 over 5. So use multiplication property. I'm going to put a 1 under here. And we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 5/6 because that will give us our 1 in front of the x, right? 6/5 times 5/6 is 1. And so we get 1x on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we're going to multiply straight across. So we get a negative 54 over 5. All right, so you don't have to shy away from checking these. You have 5/6 times negative 54 over 5 plus 5. Does that equal 4? Negative 4. And luckily here you can see that we can do some simplifying, some reducing. The 5s and then the 6 does go into the negative 54 negative 9 times, and negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. So that checks. So this negative 54 over 5, that's our solution. And this is an improper fraction, but if you need this answer as a mixed number and you want to check the directions on your homework problem, then remember that you will just divide 5 into the 54, which gives us 10 and 4/5, and then it's a negative. In problem number 4, very similar to the last one. So what I want you to do with problem number 4, I want you to pause the video and try it on your own first using problem number 3 as a guide. And then when you unpause the video, you're going to see the solution and we'll talk about it. Okay, so pause now. Okay, here's the solution. Let's see how close did you get. First of all, the answer is x equals negative 12. Did you get that? So the steps would have been you added 8 to both sides, which gives you negative 7/3 x equals 28. You then multiply both sides by a negative 3/7, which is the coefficient of negative 7/3 to get a 1x. And then on the right-hand side, that gives you the negative 12. And you checked by substituting negative 12 back into the original equation. And this multiplication here gives 28, and 28 minus 8 equals 20. So negative 12 is the solution. Hope you did good. Okay, let's go to the next video.